Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. Today I thought I would do a special report. There's also been a request for it on the Facebook page. We're going to do a special report on this Michael Jackson documentary on HBO. It's called Leaving Neverland. And it's a two-parter. It's 4 hours long. Let me put a disclaimer up here. If you want to see this show and you haven't seen it, you don't want to hear any spoilers, push pause, change to a different video, come back when you're done. So this one is a very interesting situation because we have a legacy, and that's a double entendre. We've got Michael Jackson, who's a legacy, and then we have our own path with this particular situation. I got a raccoon back there somewhere. So I think out of the 370 plus videos that I've done up to this point, I think at some point I defended him in one of my videos. And, you know, for those of you who are listening on and you don't have HBO, you're not going to see it, but you're just interested in listening to this, maybe you want to get a little setup and a preview of the whole thing. This show is about two gentlemen who were very young kids who impressed Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson took them into his camp, so to speak, and gave them the world that he had. But then when it came time for nighttime, he figured out a way to get the kid isolated from the parents. According to these two gentlemen, I should say. According to two guys, got them away from their parents, and the parents are also confirming this information. And we're going to talk about those of you who think this is still an attack. Nobody wants to believe this. Let's get that out of the way right away. Nobody wants to believe Michael Jackson was a pedophile. But it starts off with two different guys telling two different stories. They are never in the same room together. It does seem like maybe they've met. I don't know. They're definitely in the same documentary. They're grown men now. They're extremely successful people. At least I would say the minimum level of success is successful. One of them is extremely successful. And he really did it himself. He and his parents did it themselves. And obviously, the buzz around the kid that he was Michael Jackson's friend obviously opened up massive doors. I don't know that the documentary really went into the exact doors that Michael opened by making phone calls at night, when at the ranch, the Neverland Ranch, and countless hotels, and when I say there's something that happens at the ranch, according to this, according to those that went, there are hundreds of rooms. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there are hundreds of rooms on that property. It's 2,700 acres with all kinds of different properties, but you're probably talking about easily a dozen locations, maybe 24 locations, where this stuff would occur. And it was almost as if a room had 10 houses and they were by themselves for a week, they would make it a point to go into every single room just to check it off the list like little kids. But let's pull back before we get into the details. I mean, I'm not going to get into any of the explicit details. You can watch the show for that stuff. I'm finding my own emotions to be extremely unique about the subject matter because, you know, I bust people's balls all the time on the show. You know, Joe Biden touching little girls in the White House. Oh, my God, what a fucking creep that guy is, right? But honestly, Joe, on the videos, has never accomplished anything that Michael has been accused of. Perhaps he has some outside source where he gains his hubris that he is untouchable. One would assume. You check his passport for Lolita Island visits. But maybe that's just as far as that guy takes it. He's just a creeper. Seems hard to believe, right? You go that far, but you don't go the whole way. but you do it all the time, every time, and you do it in front of their parents, you do it in front of people, to the point Jeff Sessions swats your hand because you're doing it too much. But anyway, let's go back to Michael. Michael's case is so utterly unique, I'm not sure we have another Michael situation. Now, for those of you who never liked Michael, he was in your generation, you're too young, this might be a little difficult to understand. I don't know who to name in the modern era. You'd realize if someone's born in the year 2000, they're 19 years old this year. Wow. Yeah, some of us are old. But all of us who loved Michael, loved the music that he put together, realized Michael Jackson was a complete package. This kid was phenomenal as a child. So you have the first 10 years of his fame is something to just marvel at. Little tiny kid doing James Brown moves and singing adult quality emotions within a song. Then you have him doing his album Off the Wall, where he splits up from his brothers and goes solo. My God, there are songs in that album that will never cease to be musical magic. And of course, there's Michael's contribution, there's Quincy Jones' contribution, and all the players that contributed to all the songs. But what's wild about Michael, and you know, when you get into the music industry, you find out that there are bands that write their own stuff. And then you find out there are project bands that write none of their stuff. You know, Madonna's never written anything of her own. At least not her formative albums, her good albums. It's all purchased from people. All right, it's entertainment. Okay. All right, Elvis never wrote any of his songs either. Elton John never wrote any of his lyrics, but he wrote all the music. So, hey, if it's fun, we all work together and collaborate, no problem. It is super impressive when a Prince comes along and he does everything, plays all of his own instruments, sings all of his own, and writes his lyrics, sings them all, and then he's in keys that no one fucking plays in, and he's just tremendously unique. It's amazing. Then Michael does Thriller. And that's when an aftershock wave enveloped the world with this guy. You know, he had a world record because of every single song hit the top 10. Incredible. He lives the entire 80s almost inside the Thriller envelope. And then he comes out with I'm Bad, which was kind of interesting because in Thriller, all those songs match Michael's personality. By the time he gets to I'm Bad, we're all going, yeah, you are bad. I mean, not bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good, like Run DMC said. But he's not exactly the big alpha male that he was trying to play in this stuff. And, you know, sort of was like, Michael, you don't have to do that. You can just be this cool person. You don't have to hire Wesley Snipes to stand next to you to make you macho, you know. But again, another big album, tremendous number of like blockbuster songs. And the guy was just untouchable. The thing about his music is that every single song has just this feeling of magic, and the Jackson 5 had it too. It was as if this group of humans were ordained by the music gods to whenever they wanted to make music, the most heavenly melodies came down. Whatever this guy was trying to accomplish was always accomplished. Even the Scream album or the Scream single had its phenomenal qualities to it. It appears as if Michael had his stage where, or I should say years, to make it easier to understand, where he was engaging this. Maybe he was forming his methodology, and then it goes all the way to probably the 2000s, probably about 2005 or so, where he is finally pulling out of this sort of danger zone. But we're all sitting here going, oh my God, we've been defending this guy because we love him. We love what he does. He brings us happiness. He brings us emotions. The music that he sings and the way that it's written, the way that it is played, the lyrics. If you get into the lyrics, it makes you feel wonderful. It makes you feel like the world has some hope. But underneath is a really broken dude. With Michael, there's this weird caveat to the guy. What happens when we hear about pedophiles? A priest, of all things, touching children. Well, there's a distinct difference, at least on the surface, that we think we're seeing, which is that Michael's entire childhood was non-existent. You realize we saw him perform at 5 years old with his brothers, and he had the James Brown moves down. He sang amazing. He was just on target. So, 5 years old? Well, what do you think happened? Did you think he was living a normal life up till 5, and one day he goes, "Hey, brothers, I've been listening to James Brown. Mind if I sing?" No. Joe was on those kids the second that they could walk. It's a very similar behavior, like Tiger Woods' dad did it, Mozart's dad did it. These parents that push their kids into talents, and they kind of hate their parents for it. They don't necessarily have the same exact emotion we have because it's a job. It turned out that Michael ended up loving being on stage. He said it several times. He could just live on stage. If he could, he'd be the happiest dude on planet Earth. One, because he'd never be alone. Now, why the guy ever stopped touring, I don't know if that was his opinion. When we think about a priest, a Joe Biden, we're talking about people that grew up, although they may have been abused or whatever, they still had a chance to get out of this because they had a normal maturation thing happen. And then they chose to go there. Now, some people might think that that's all bullshit, that it's just a cover story for a guy who wants to be a perv. Well, I don't know how long you could pretend being a kid and spend 24 hours a day running around with little kids pretending to be kids just so you could do something with them later that's inappropriate. I don't have that in me. I don't know about you. Jesus, just even if I had no ill intentions at all, running around all fucking day, 365 days out of the year, spending, thousands of hours on the phone with each one of these kids. But now, here's where I'm trying to check my own brain. Am I pulling punches with Michael Jackson? Am I not willing to criticize him as much as I would criticize others? I'm still analyzing. I just finished it. I mean, it's taken me about 3 days to get through the 4 hours of the show because my life's busy, and I'm just like, okay, I'll watch like half an hour here, an hour there, 2 hours there. It's riveting. It's riveting. I just had a friend of mine send me a text or on Facebook, and he said, hey, Joe M from Twitter, who's a part of the Q team, he makes all those videos that Q promotes, says, Michael Jackson was always innocent, and they framed him because he wanted out of the cabal of the music industry. And we know that there's a high chance that Michael Jackson was killed. And that doctor that was accused of killing him was truly in the kitchen making a sandwich, having sedated Michael with the drug he did use. I forgot the name of it. Sounds like Profanol or something like that. When I was, here in 2009, I was in this house, and the death of Michael Jackson was announced. Then the immediate live news was covering the fact that the LAPD had a tape of two people running away from the house on surveillance, and then the LAPD lost it. Okay. Now, it could be that these people found out he was a pedophile, found out he was untouchable in court because the people just won't believe it, and they just determined to do a capital punishment maneuver. But I've talked to, a few people in the music industry and in the celebrity industry, and there's definitely, it happens in the movie industry, a death of a celebrity is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and with the Michael Jackson, it's worth tens of billions of dollars. Well, I don't know how expensive you think a hit is in this world, but let's just say an average hit, where someone puts a contract on his wife or a business partner, is $50,000 to have a nice, clean situation. Okay. Well, if you're standing on top of the pile of money, the potential pile of money, if a celebrity dies, like a Prince, do you pay $10 million to get it done absolutely covertly? Sure. Why not? It's good. You're going to make I think the Jackson franchise made $1.1 billion within 12 months of his death. And of course, record companies are siphoning off. Everyone involved is siphoning it off. It's worth a tremendous amount of money to kill these people. It's one reason why I have to get the world straightened out, people. But let's get into the notion that this is a hoax, because this is what, I wanted to finish this 4-hour documentary and have tons of holes I could talk about. Well, that doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. And look how he looks, disingenuous on camera. Look at the mom. It looks like they're lying. Well, if these people are lying, then it is the most elaborate hit piece I have ever seen. It would put the moon hoax to shame. It really would. In terms of people, and maybe not the technology, but the individuals lying about it. There's more tell signs and the press conference after the Apollo 11 mission than there is in this 4-hour constant video. So one of the kids is from Simi Valley, and one of the kids is from Australia. One of the kids was about 9 years old. One of them was 5 years old. Now, the molestation didn't start for a couple of years on the 5-year-old, but it got pretty intense. Pretty intense. For those of you who are grimacing and the unknown is getting to you right now, let me just say one thing that didn't occur but one time for a very split second. And if you take all the testimonies of these two dudes, Michael did not engage in penetration sex with these kids, except for one attempt with one of the kids, and it didn't work, and they stopped and basically pretended like nothing happened and went back to their old ways. There you go. It's as far down as I'm going to go on that rabbit hole. But you have these kids that are then, one of them was a dancer who imitated Michael. He's the Australian kid. The second kid in Simi Valley he got into a commercial with Michael Jackson, the Pepsi commercial. He really didn't know who Michael was. He wasn't enamored with him, but he's the one that did the commercial where he snuck into Michael Jackson's dressing room, was trying everything on, and Michael catches him. And as soon as Michael saw the kid, he was just mesmerized by him, and this is the kid that had the mock wedding when he was 9 years old. He actually has a little box of rings that has the wedding ring in it, as well as other rings that he had to earn through doing things with Michael, and it was all a game. He was in on it. They went and bought the rings together. And they said that they were for females and that the kid was there because his fingers were the same size as the girls. And so when you see the trauma of him just trying to hold the rings, it's amazing. It's powerful. But these parents, the mothers were always the ones that were with Michael. The fathers were in there and out of there, but they had to go earn the money. And so they typically, and the mothers eventually, hustled like crazy to get their sons' careers. So hats off to both of them. But unfortunately, both of them now have to live with the fact that they trusted this situation, which was obviously unorthodox. But because Michael behaved like a child and he was extremely vulnerable, probably for real, he had enough adult mind to conceive of this and go for this. And I don't understand the whole thing with why the little boy thing. That just seems so unbelievably bizarre. I could see a guy going, well, I lost my childhood, so I want to sleep with little girls because I wish not little girls, but I didn't get to have my first kiss at whatever he thinks the age might be. Nope, it's all boys. But in order to create this as a hoax, let's just say they hired one of us to create this as a hoax. You are talking about whole families being the most incredible actors on planet Earth, right? All the brothers, the sisters, the wives, obviously the parents. Again, none of the fathers were interviewed. One of the fathers had already passed away, and he hung himself, man. There's no telling if this guy would have hung himself had they never met Michael Jackson. He had some bipolar issues, but you never know. They left him back in Australia and started living in the United States to follow the kid's career, and they just never came back permanently. It was sort of over. They never really talked about a divorce, but when the last kid needed to move on because he was of age and he had some opportunities in a different area, I think it was back in the United States, as soon as the last kid left, the father hung himself that night. These mothers went through the full anger, denial, negotiation, and acceptance, both when they were talked out of, allowing their kid to sleep in his own room by himself versus sleeping in Michael's bedroom. And this, I don't know if it was all serendipitous, like it just happened to work out, but because Michael had turned it into a pattern, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like maybe it was a mistake the first time. For instance, the first kid who goes over, who's 5, he has an older sister that's I guess, actually, sorry, he doesn't come over till he's 7. His sister's 10. And so Michael said, you mind if they sleep with me? I've got a loft above my bed. So they go around the staircase and we're all facing the same TV and they could stay up there together, brother or sister. I'll stay down below. And the mom was like, okay, all right. And they end up never leaving his bed, watching movies, cartoons, eating candy, whatever, and they all just crash on the bed and nothing occurs. And that establishes the first archetype of, hey, this is okay. And he's a grown man, but he's also incapable of acting like an adult. So it's sort of like maybe the 12-year-old brother who's hanging out with his younger brother and sister. And that's the amazing illusion that he put on. And quite frankly, it might be exactly who he was. And so this is how he was able to ride the razor's edge in the parents' consent model. And of course, the parents are down the hallway, and you would imagine that if your child was getting touched in a strange way, that your child might respond and say something, scream, leave, at least say something the next day, which would be too late anyway. But Michael didn't make any moves right away. He established trust. He started talking to the kids and sort of brainwashing the boys and saying, look, you shouldn't trust anybody, especially women. I think that was weird. I never heard him having a major problem with his mother. He always quoted having major problems with his father. For it being a hoax, again, it would be so much coaching over probably months, if not years, to get everyone to be able to draw on their emotions and sob through this process. And I don't know about you, for the men out there, and I don't know if anyone listening has ever experienced something like this with a family member or someone else, it wouldn't be easy to admit this to the world. And that's what happened. These guys couldn't admit it to themselves. They couldn't admit it to their parents, because when Michael started getting busted in 93 and getting charged for this stuff, the parents immediately went to the kids and said, whoa, okay, wait a minute. Did you ever get touched? No way. They got interviewed. They testified on his behalf, the parents and the kids. The parents testified because the kids told their parents that nothing happened. And so the parents were like, yeah, I didn't think so, but I just, I have to ask. And so when the kids defended him, because Michael told them very deviously and perhaps ingeniously for his own sake, that if the police ever found out that any of this occurred, he would go to jail and they would go to jail. And so these little kids are like, I don't want to go to jail. I didn't know Michael had so many apartments all over the place. He had one called the Hideout in Westwood. I'm not exactly sure where the hell that is around here. He had his ranch. He had little apartments here and there. And so these kids were always invited. And then it started turning into this, one of the tools that he used was this Neverland ranch. because the ranch was so phenomenally created that even the parents were in utter shock and awe. The parents were finding their inner child, and then you have this Michael Jackson guy who acts like a child, hanging out with their children, and so they're in fantasy land. It is such a place of wonder that you're kind of willing to suspend any disbelief that this isn't real. And so it was a seductive thing. I would wager that he had no idea that it was going to have such an intoxicating effect on the adults, thus provide a little lubricant, pardon the pun, between the kids and their parents and establishing this trust. When it turned into hotels or these penthouse suites / condos downtown, then the technique of creating this illusion, I guess every place he ever stayed, it was always blown out with amazing everything, memorabilia, cartoons. You could eat candy, anything you wanted. If you walked into his theater at his house in Neverland, all the concessions free. Everything's free. How that guy didn't weigh 400 pounds, I don't know. But then he would take the kids shopping, and he would buy them anything they want. He'd say, get a shopping cart and fill it with whatever you want. He would call these kids at their house every single day. He gave the kids fax machines, and he'd fax them all kinds of, handwritten letters, and then they'd fax something back. Usually it's only the boy, though. If the sister answered the phone, he'd only talk to her for, 30 to 60 seconds, and it was just get your brother, get your brother, get your brother. But he also established these really close relationships with the mothers. Trust. Imagine having a 1-hour conversation with Michael Jackson where he's vulnerable, he's crying on the phone, he feels alone. He's telling you he wants to come back to your house. I mean, this guy went to Simi Valley constantly and spent the night. Could you imagine? Pick your favorite star. And then they start staying with you. It's every kid's dream when you have a movie star that you like or some sort of celebrity that you like for them to come and hang out with you. I don't care if it's Michael Jordan or whatever, LeBron James, any of these people. Johnny Depp coming hanging at your house. And genuinely hanging out your house, having the barbecue, doing the sleepover. He's there the next day, and then the next day, and then he stays for a week. Anything you need, he just pays for it. It's surreal. And because life has its pressures, it's an escape. Well, geez, imagine you were making just enough money to scrape by, and Michael comes into your house and starts paying for food and all the entertainment, and all those burdens that you had as a parent are gone. You're intoxicated. So I don't think it's a hoax, as much as I would love for it to be a hoax. Now, what blows my mind is that he never touched Macaulay Culkin. Maybe he knew Macaulay Culkin was too famous to touch. He never touched Corey Feldman, supposedly. I'm waiting to see if Corey pops on this or Macaulay Culkin. They may just choose to never say that they were molested, thus maintaining a stronger position in the public eye. Well, he never touched me. But after each one of the kids, the Simi Valley kid and the Australian kid, had their run with Michael, and there was one occasion when Michael asked the Australian mother, I want to keep your son for 1 year. I will take him around the world. I will teach him how to dance. I will introduce him to everyone. I will blow up his career. The other kid was interested in filmmaking, which he ended up doing. Both of them did it. And the Wade kid ended up being one of the most famous choreographers in the world. And I think he kind of did it all by himself with his mom. He's NSYNC's choreographer. He's Britney Spears' choreographer. He's supposedly handling every creative element of Britney Spears' most famous tours, which I assume maybe stage design, everything. And he's a workaholic, and he, both guys are married. Both guys have kids. And, they lied to their parents, and they lied to they lied to the press, they lied in court, and they lied to their wives. And eventually the kid from Australia just started, he had so much, both of them have massive PTSD. And eventually the kid from Australia he got really, really famous. He got a feature film project with a pretty big budget. And he just had a mental breakdown. It became utterly insurmountable to reconcile what happened to him and thinking about it happening to his kid. And he cracked. And that's when he went on television and started telling his story. And then the other guy saw it on television and had his wife watch it. And he goes, yeah, that's what happened. That happened to me too. And, you know, I really can't begin to fathom being married with a wife and having to, in mid-stride, tell my wife, one, I lied to her, but two, have to admit that this kind of thing happened, because it's emasculating. Even though it happened to you when you were a kid, it's still emasculating to have to say that. And, you know, psychologists will probably tell you that, you know, kids do things on sleepovers. I've heard 100 stories about this. They experiment, they mess around, but in the end, those are kids on kids, right? So they're being goofy and they may only try one thing once or whatever, and then they're over. That's different. This is an adult with a kid, with adult equipment. It makes it different. But that gets to this quagmire where I remember the lawsuit in the early 90s, 1993. I remember the lawsuit reemerging in the mid-2000s. And, you know, when in 1993, Michael looks relatively normal. Kind of looks like his bad tour, you know. And so you're watching it and you're kind of thinking, well, he is really strange. I think that's when he did his Oprah interview, I believe. When he started having the problems in the 2000s, that's when he really had done so much surgery on his face that he started to look like an odyssey. He had lost so much weight that also made him look strange. I have never seen, and I have not been able to really bring myself to watch the Michael Jackson movie they made right after he died. Part of it was it hurt because I didn't really know anything about this other situation, but two, I didn't want to be propagandized about the guy. No one's touched Prince. They have not made a movie about him. I'm sure they're trying to. I worked with one of Prince's former producers for about a year, off and on. He was interested in one of the products I was making. It's one of the three dudes that took him through his whole career. Are we pulling punches with Michael Jackson? And if we are, why? I think the number one reason we pull punches with him is we loved him before any of this was even suspected. He had made an imprint on our souls. And let's just say, I mean, there's this rumor he got a girl pregnant way back in the Billie Jean days, and this kid was raised over in like Switzerland or something. And he attended the funeral. Kind of looks like Michael. If there's a child of Michael out there, I would assume that would be revealed at this stage because the family would know. And why not? Why not come out and say you're Michael Jackson's kid and get Jermaine to do a little press conference or something like that? Because he has 3 children. I think they're all coming from different sources, although a lot of people think that the youngest son does look like him. Why he wouldn't contribute his DNA to the process is beyond me. Yeah, you like to do this weird shit? Okay, well, at least drop some stuff in there. So I think that, you know, let's just say maybe 1985 is maybe where he started doing this kind of stuff. I think it's probably before that. The little 5-year-old definitely was around the Smooth Criminal days, which I believe is the Bad album, right? And so he's done all this contribution to our life. He's given us all these songs and these videos, and we've had all this stuff, and now we don't want to believe that the good guy, the ultimate good guy, is a bad guy. Elvis Presley was able to punch out without any major rumors about anything super strange. He definitely slept with more women than his wife, or he at least did something with him. We've got him on tape admitting to certain things. But he's a stud. He was very ill when he died. And so, okay, he left us way too early. Everyone said he was a gentleman. He's just a Tennessee boy. As Michael started becoming a physical oddity because he kind of considered his body, I guess, a canvas of some sort, it definitely opened the door to believe almost anything that could be thrown at him. If this is true, which, boy, this video looks extremely true. I'd be interested to see a debunking video on this whole thing. The kid, Wade, did come back and try to sue the Jackson family for money, but they threw the case out because of statute of limitations. But this kid has no problem making money. In fact, I would assume that whatever financial goal he might have for himself, besides maybe billions of dollars, he could hit it. He could hit tens of millions of dollars easy because he's so talented. Not sure exactly what the Simi Valley kid does today. I don't know. It looks like these two gentlemen are being extremely honest. But what are the other reasons why we pull our punches? Well, I think part of it is that a lot of us defended him. We just thought, come on, if Jackson was going to touch somebody, I always felt that Corey Feldman would have definitely been one of those kids. One, because Corey says he's been molested by more than one person in Hollywood. The one name he did drop is a guy that's, fled to Mexico. I don't know whatever happened to that guy. I don't know if he got extradited or whatever. Again, statute of limitations, I think in America, is 4 years for any type of molestation. Well, how convenient. But you did have this movement in the 90s, oh my God, where people were psychologists or psychiatrists were hypnotizing kids and then doing that leading technique of the interview to get the kid to accuse their fathers. Usually it's always daughters accusing the fathers of having molested them when they were young. And these poor dads, were like, what are you talking about? Are you mad at me or something, And they would destroy lives. They destroy their fathers' lives. I'm sure there's a couple in there that are true, or even half or whatever. Shit, I don't know. But this was a game. This was a game to a bunch of, as I remember hearing it documented eventually in the end, because it disappeared. This technique disappeared out of the common, news feed, which was that the psychiatrists were in league with the attorneys, and everybody was going to drain everybody of money. Interesting. So, I will have to eat crow the more I accept this thing. I'm in the Kubler-Ross acceptance phase right now. It will take a tremendous amount of additional information, and it's going to take, I almost think, proof. It's going to have to take like video proof or something else to make me believe that these two gentlemen, because they're the only two that know whether this is right or wrong. Them coming out and telling, here's the thing. These events of them telling their parents, telling their one kid told his brother first, and then he had to tell his wife because his wife is standing right there, and then later that night he had to tell his mother, and all these people were recalling these events. Okay, one, all those people would have to be liars, which means they're the most amazing actors I've ever seen on a documentary, which I do not believe they're actors. I believe they're truly telling the story. And then this other guy from Simi Valley sees the other guy, Wade, go on TV, and he's doing the same thing in his household. When both of them had exhibited major behavioral problems the older that they got, and coincidentally after their firstborns occurred. So in order to disrupt and dislodge that truth, it's going to be rough. I will say it right now. I know at least one very, very famous person who is going to be really struggling with this. I assume that process has already occurred, or it's occurring right now as this video's out there. I couldn't possibly reach out and bring up the subject. But there are going to be stars of all calibers super struggling with this. It depends on if they're pervs themselves, of course. We don't want to believe that our heroes have this potential. One, to have anything wrong with them at all, but two, to take it to that level of wrong. Now, in Michael's mind, I would put a lot of money on a bet that if we put a truth serum in the guy and had him on a lie detector test and we simply said, do you think you were hurting these kids? I'm willing to bet he would say, no. We were enjoying ourselves. I mean, they were happy. We did it in every single room in my Jolly Rancher ranch, right? And we did it in all the places we ever went around the world. We did it, thousands of times. And except for one event where it didn't work, and he was, I hate to even fucking say it this way, he was good to stop, okay? Never tried it again. I'm sure he thinks that they were loving just as much as he did. I think that's, in the case of the sycophant mindset of rape, you know that you are dominating another human being and their suffering is your, I guess, what a rapist gets off on. This is kind of the opposite polarity, at least for Michael. This, now you mix the two together and you have horrific situations, which is more your Lolita Island thing. But I don't think we can write Michael any blank checks. As much as we might be able to explain it to ourselves. There's that TED Talk where the woman got up and was trying to explain pedophilia, and it went around the web, and, of course, it sounds like this woman is trying to make it okay. Not necessarily okay for everybody to run off and do it, but when it occurs, we're to be like, oh, I'm sorry you're having problems. But now, what if, it just occurred to me to say this, what if someone's having the fantasy of doing that, and they have the wherewithal to tell someone, oh, I'm having those visions too, and I've never ever touched a kid in my life, but I need help. Now what do? They're in the between. They're in this sort of purgatory between heaven and hell. They haven't done anything wrong, and so maybe they go to heaven. I don't know if our thoughts sins, If they do touch anybody, well, then they get punishment on the other side. I've never heard of anyone doing that. Each one of the kids found themselves being invited back into Michael's camp and finding another kid had taken their place eventually. I think, I can't exactly remember. I think Wade had a kid named Jordy replace him, and I think that the other gentleman, which I don't know why I can't remember his name, and Macaulay Culkin replace him. And I would have loved to have seen the timeline in some sort of graphic so my brain could remember it. It did seem like there was some sort of overlap, but then again, he was so obsessed with each child each time he committed himself that it seems like there's not enough room in his schedule to put a second kid on the Barbie, right? Because the mother said that he would talk to these kids for like 7 hours straight on the telephone. Could you imagine the phone bill back in the day? And then if you're a parent or you're a person, you're an adult, and you just want to get to the point where you're like, this can never happen again. Well, then we're like, okay, what do we do? I don't think too many celebrities are going to ask to be with your child in bed, besides Michael Jackson. Obviously, if that request were to ever come about, your child gets isolated away from you, and they're with that celebrity, the hair on the back of your neck will stand up now because of the story of Michael Jackson. And there's this weird thing, it just brings up so many different scenarios that you don't hear about. What you don't hear about is there are cases of this, but I know one celebrity personally, very personally. I mean, I know this person. I've been to his house. We've totally played music together and done all this other shit. And he was young. He was actually, I knew him before he was 18, and then I knew him after he was 18. And he was involved in a situation where he had been sleeping with a woman in her 30s. And the case was put out there that she was taking advantage of him. If you knew this kid, he's a good kid, but he's a normal guy. He loves sex, just like any kid. This was just a conquest. He definitely is not sucking his thumb curled up in some fucking ball somewhere, okay? He's telling his buddies, oh yeah, man, I tapped that. Trust me. He's not psychologically damaged, okay? But you don't hear about this algorithm from a woman to a little boy. I don't hear about it. I'm telling you, this might sound crazy, but every little kid who's a normal, heterosexual boy, when you're young, probably 9 and up, it's when your sexuality starts kind of peeking into the reality, and your friends are all starting to experiment, and then, boys start talking to each other. I mean, I don't think I discovered my sexuality. The thing is, I'd already played with girls before I ever played with myself. But I remember being taught how to do that by one of my buddies who was just like, you ever do this? I'm like, well, what's that? And he goes, when you do this. Oh, you can do that? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll let you know, man. And we're all like, oh, wow, that works. I could totally solve my own problems now. Try to keep that as symbolic as possible in the conversation so that the vividness doesn't make you want to throw in your mouth. Too late. Men have always been portrayed. It's funny, when I was a kid, the one cartoon that was always showing up as a kid, and it always was sort of kind of confusing to me, was the caveman with the stick. And he hit a girl on the head. I think this was in several movies too. I think it was even in Ringo Starr's movie, and it was his caveman movie, and it was in, I believe, History of the World Part 1. But what's the scenario? It was a caveman hits a woman on the head, knocks her out, and he drags her away. And, I guess you're assuming something's going to happen. It's his woman now. That's the way I always thought these kind of things were going to occur. Adult man or older guy, whatever, because we're all programmed to procreate, right? We're the conquerors. We have to go out and kill things to eat, we just stopped that process. Do you realize that? Do you realize that in America, you went out and hunted your food probably until 1920? And, a lot of people kept going all the way into the middle of the 20th century because they lived out in the Ozarks or whatever. And you went out and you hunted a boar, you hunted your venison, you raised livestock and had to slaughter it. And now we just go to the grocery store. So that alpha gene, that gene that was, if you didn't have a husband that was strong, you needed to live in a village where your beta male could go out with the alpha males and kill a beast. In fact, you could be an alpha male, but you just didn't have the body to back up your instincts. And so you had to be out there with other people to survive. And so this carries straight into sexuality. What still blows my mind is, okay, you miss your childhood, Michael. Okay, great. Why boys? Something happened with his mother. I never heard him spending much time with his mother. He's always in a studio, peeing in a cup and hanging out with his brothers and being around guys. You'd almost think he'd be more of a heterosexual because that was what he didn't have. It's the mystery to conquer. Not to conquer in an aggressive way, but just to kind of solve the mystery. I mean, if you lived in a particular area of the world that was beautiful, but you only knew your little tiny area, but you could look over the hill every time you got up to a high place and be like, oh, there's something really nice over there. A guy just wants to go look at that stuff, secure it, explore it, and then bring the family over there, whatever, expand your own empire, take over more land. The circular logic back to your own sex, for me, will remain a mystery. Especially in the case of pedophilia. I don't know if one can claim, but it might be possible to theorize, as ludicrous as this might sound, that the silver lining that might come out of this, some sort of maturation benefit for humanity, might be that we sort of wake up to this whole thing. We stop making excuses. We stop, those of us live in Los Angeles and have had the privilege of working with extremely talented people who are very dedicated. Yes, when you're in the room with these people, you will stare across the room. And just as an academic, entrepreneurial standpoint, you are marveling at this human being that, yeah, they might have been in the right place at the right time, but the amount of skills that they had to manifest to get that opportunity to trigger is really amazing. And the more that they accomplish, like a prince, the dude was punished by being locked in his fully furnished basement of his father's house with the piano and all sleeping quarters and all that kind of stuff. But he practiced on the piano as just, whatever. And his father was a jazz musician, so when he hears his son playing, he doesn't go down and stop him. You can't have any fun. He's like, good, practice that piano. So he just got familiar with it, and then he moved on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And eventually he creates volumes of albums that are so incredibly unique from each other, it's mind-blowing. And if you like that type of music he makes, or made, it just eclipses all the other stuff that's coming out of the jukebox that's just sort of like cut and paste. And the other thing you'll notice when you meet people that are that have had these incredible lives, I know a good half dozen of them, where from a young age, 18 or up, some of them were younger than that I know, they were so famous from such a young age and still famous to this day that they didn't have to mature. Where you and I were getting our ass kicked by the world and having to learn how to compromise our desires, they didn't have to do that. They could be babies. They could run and go, I don't like this. I want this to be different. And people are like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, whatever you want, because they're starstruck and they got the money to back up whatever they want. Michael, quite frankly, might be the most famous person that has lived in my lifetime. So that star power was like really immeasurable. And it created that reality distortion field around him. One of the more amazing insights that both these guys that are in the documentary contribute to the documentary, and obviously to us via the documentary, is that tug of war between, when the abuse starts occurring, they don't know it's wrong. But they also love this guy on a level that is like any one of the kids of that time. It's okay to love Michael Jackson before he started doing this, or especially if you didn't know he was doing this. Hey, that's just humanity. It's just what we are. You're being deceived. And so this guy would show up at a concert, show up at a location, an airport, a hotel, a restaurant. He'd go shopping, and people are like losing their minds outside. Anything you want, you can have. One, because probably a lot of people will give it to you, but two, he can afford it. I have an extremely close friend of mine who was hired by Michael on 2 different occasions, and we're talking about getting a phone call. Michael wants to see you. They were not quite his generation. It was 2 people worked together. And they say, well, the limousine's coming to your house. There's going to be a plane waiting for you to get from there to there. There'll be a helicopter getting you from there to there. And it's just like this fantasy world. You get in this car and you're VIP the whole way. When you stay with him, it's VIP, and then you fly all the way back VIP. Even if you have a lot of money, it's still out of this fucking world. It really is. And imagine a child trying to reconcile all this in their mind. We're teaching our kids to want to be famous. And I know that, I give examples all the time that are celebrity-based examples of creativity. And I also did an episode on fame, which sort of anesthetizes, vaccinates you against this notion that fame is anything in life you should ever go for. You really, if you are still trying to be famous in this world, you got to stop. Just do what you love. And if fame comes with it, then fine. I heard an interesting admission from Bennett Cerf. He's one of the gentlemen. He was a big publisher back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. He gave us the dictionary, one of the first printed dictionaries back in the day. Cerf Publishing. He talked about being on What's My Line, and he was interviewed, I think, in 1968 after the show was canceled the year before. It's only like a 4.5 minute interview, but I guess there's like 4 parts to it, so it's fascinating to hear him talk about it. But he was just a gentle man, and his wife and kids and all this other stuff. And he said, I won't lie to you. He goes, I loved being famous from that show. He goes, anywhere I went, people knew me. They wanted to shake my hands. They wanted to buy me dinner or something. And the guy was loaded. He didn't need anything. But of course, you can't turn that down when someone wants to get you something. It's rude. And they want to go home and say they bought somebody a drink or someone a dinner or whatever. But he admitted it, and he gave a really lucid definition of it. And he said, he said it in a way that, for probably one of the very first times I've ever heard anyone admit they loved fame, but that he didn't let it really get to him as a man. He didn't go home to his wife differently. He didn't go home to his children differently. And if you have to accept the fame for something that you've done, that would be a great example to go listen to. It took these kids, I guess they're grown men now, I shouldn't say that. It took these 2 gentlemen who were in this documentary, years to deal with, I would say quite technically, decades. It seems like it took both of them 2 decades to admit it to their family that these things occurred. And they were in the epicenter of it all. They were the ones that were going a little bit bonkers as a result of sort of the PTSD of the moment. I mean, imagine, we don't really have, some of you have dealt with this, right? And I'm not looking for any of you to admit this in the comment section, so don't feel any obligation from me. I'm not trying to push anybody in this area. Your life is your life, and it's your business, none of my business. But, when something happens, like I remember events when I was a little kid. I remember events when I first moved to California, some of them just photographically amazing. But imagine committing or participating in this abuse for over, probably just shy of 10 years apiece. And then it's 20 years ago. You start having your own kids. You start thinking through your own actions and sort of what could happen to your kids. And you start trying to reconcile the frustration of the whole event. And then he dies, of course. I think it was 2009. He dies, and you kind of put it to bed. Well, maybe I don't have to say anything for the rest of my life, or maybe I can say something now because he's dead. Both these guys tried to hold it in, tried to deny it, and they started eating them alive. There's probably other things in our lives that have occurred that aren't that deep, that intense, or maybe it's as intense, but it's not as sexually explicit, of course. And we need to purge. Who knows? It really made me think about, and I've had a lot of conversations recently with close friends of mine about just sort of being an open book with your life and not lying. So you don't have to hang on to the lie and try to figure out, what did I say again? Oh my God, I've never lived that life. I've never had to live that life. I guess I've been lucky, super lucky. They talked, one of them said, when you hold this stuff in, you have to hold this lie in. And because they had to constantly defend him up to a point, they it starts to, re-energize that horrible acidic ball in their chest that they're hanging on to this big act of deception. I can only begin to fathom what that might be like. If I just even start going towards the empathetic mindset of what they might be going through, it's so intensely vile that, hats off that they've been able to reset their lives to the extent they have, and I'm sure both of them will be dealing with it for a while. It seems like one of the guys from Simi Valley, he's still dealing with it, and he was extremely articulate about that. And just, I don't know, I think by them sharing their experience, they have helped us deal with the little things that we deal with. So now, as we close off here, I'm going to bring up a weird analogy for you, a weird comparison for you. If you've chronically listened to my episodes, which I'm sure a lot of you haven't because the subject matter is going to draw people in that have never seen the show before, maybe. Shadow banning doesn't kill it first. I've told you guys that the Statue of Liberty is a gift from France, right? Remember that? It was completed in 1885. It's really the bankers of Europe trying to stamp America with ownership. Now we have, and they wrote the saying that is, give us you're tired, you're weary, trying to create a migration from Europe to break the back of America. And, lo and behold, that brought us some of the best DNA we've ever had. They fought, gangs in New York shit happened, and then we kind of got along. Some people are extremely proud about going through Ellis Island now. Now, technically speaking, if the Great Awakening were to reset the world, all this Masonic shit needs to go away, doesn't it? We don't want that symbology all over the place. Secret societies, just determining where our streets are. Washington, D.C. has all got these pentagrams and pyramids and owls. The owls are the assistant to the Queen Semiramis. Queen Semiramis, or Ishtar, is the Statue of Liberty. Columbia Pictures, same thing. Well, technically speaking, I don't know how we leave all that stuff up if we were to really clean the world off. So you reset society, you say we rewrite our constitution and get Europe, their constitutions updated so that tyranny and weird shit over there doesn't happen anymore. How do we keep all these symbols of control worshipped? Technically speaking, as much as it would make me feel strange, I think they need to be disassembled or maybe redone in a way that completely erases this worship. Statue of Liberty's in Ghostbusters, man. Ghostbusters 2, right? Okay. We love the Statue of Liberty. It's a thing that when people see it, they cry. But technically, it's a symbol of control, and not a good one. Okay, I made my point. Now, let's go back to Michael Jackson. There are radio stations right now pulling his records, never to play him again. We'll see if it holds. But now I have all these memories of Michael Jackson's music. And, technically in my brain I could say, okay, let's just say that he didn't touch anyone from 1985 and back to his birth. And so all that music, Thriller, Off the Wall, and his Jackson 5 stuff, I can still listen to it because it was the innocent Michael that wasn't touching kids. And everything after that, we throw it away because it is part of the lesser era of his existence. Culturally speaking, depending on how old you are, and I would say probably, I'm probably one of the youngest people, but again, that guy conquered the world at all ages for his entire life, right? So he's showing up in the 2000s and little kids are just running up to him. So I think his span of people worshiping him, and people aren't going to believe this, and people aren't going to watch this documentary. That's what's also going to take place. We struggle with this same sort of thing with religious saviors that never existed, And we can't reconcile it because we built our whole life around our saviors. And so we're still stuck in these paradigms. And this is where kids get left with churches and they get molested by preachers. And because these preachers are just like Michael Jackson, they're untouchable. They're God's voice. They are the authorities on heaven. They've created this extortionism thing where it's like, because of original sin, you got to go through a church to get to God. And if you don't go to the church, you're going to go to hell and fire and brimstone, all these fucking stories, right? Something we also need to let go of. That's my opinion. You'll feel extremely liberated when you can do that, and you don't have to hate all the lessons that these churches bring you. Just acknowledge it for the sweet, wonderful thing that it is. It's a story. It's a parable. It's a savior that teaches you in parables is a parable himself. But with Michael, he's very real. He's extremely real. I don't sit around playing Michael Jackson music at my house. Every once in a while, though, I get Off the Wall out. That's the, Working Day and Night, those kind of songs. Sometimes Billie Jean will come on after I haven't heard it for 5 or 10 years, and as soon as that bass line comes in, man, it just has this emotion. Brings you back to all these times when, I was living in the Midwest and we didn't have Disneyland and surfboards and lush palm trees everywhere. It was cold and dirty and not, we didn't make a lot of money, so everybody was kind of struggling, but we ended up loving each other instead of worshiping celebrities too much, Is Michael Jackson going to be erased? Well, I have my doubts. And the reason why I have my doubts is that we have former presidents who are complete rapists, who are still making money at speeches, still able to show up in public. Society has looked completely the other way when women were raped. We have famous film people who have admitted to taking the virginity of young teenage girls. Some went into exile for decades and came back. We have famous film people that have married their stepkids. And they're still okay. Michael's dead now. Those people are still alive. And they're still collecting a paycheck, I think this is... I think the Leaving Neverland, if it's true, and it certainly looks like it is, if it's true, it is probably one of the most monumental cultural bombshells that I have ever heard of, let alone personally experienced in my living room not more than a couple hours ago when I finished the series. There are lessons to be learned in all situations, right? I'm not even sure what the lessons are exactly. We know some low-hanging fruit lessons, but man, I think there's some pretty hefty lessons that are yet to be discovered, triaged by our brain, and embedded into our value system. Now, no one has any qualms or, doubts about whether or not this should have taken place or shouldn't have taken place. We all know that's not allowed. We don't do this to kids. But it's us accepting the fact that one of our heroes, maybe former heroes now, did this all the time, thousands of times, with different kids. What is just coming to mind right now is that there was... the thing is that the documentary didn't seem to cover, which I don't know if it's true or not anymore. I know I have quoted it as being true because it was presented to me as truth, is that one of the kids' fathers extorted money out of Michael. And I remember being in the car in the Bay Area, and they played the audio tape the guy left with his attorney. It was a voicemail, an answering machine thing. And the guy says, I know Michael didn't touch my kid, but don't you think it's worth $25 million if we accuse him of it? So that is something I heard with my own ears from the guy's mouth. There was the kid that I think was accused. He came into Michael Jackson's Neverland, and he claimed he had cancer. And then it was later deemed he didn't have cancer. So that seems like it was a scam. And they tried to, I guess that was the kid that made the $10 million or something like that. I don't know if that's the same kid, same father, same kid. I don't know. The maid that said she caught Michael in the shower doing something sexual with a little boy. And then there's the same maid, I think, said that she saw him showering with the boy. Of course, not dressed. They supposedly got her to admit she made it up. So what's going on? I mean, was she paid off to say she made it up and that she's actually telling the truth? It's that reasonable doubt they keep inserting in everyone's mind, right? The jurors from his 2005 hearing, can't remember when it actually concluded, somewhere in that realm. They were interviewed after the fact on national television, and one of these old ladies said that the defendant, or I guess the mother of one of the kids, was being very angry at the jury. She pointed a finger or something at the juror, and she said, "Boy, when she did that to me, I was going to stick it to her. You don't point your finger at me." Okay, maybe the mother's really angry because she knows that this happened to her kid, and so because she's not being pleasant, she loses in court. So I am interested in your comments. Obviously, this will draw folks in that are just going to be, Michael's innocent forever. Hey, you're listening to the voice of a guy that wishes he was completely innocent and that these guys never existed, and that the only thing we had as an accusation was nothing more than an accusation with no evidence, no ability to synchronize two different guys with two different experiences with him. And again, in the conclusion of the documentary, it was pretty apparent that they hadn't met each other. But when you listen to their detailed descriptions of what took place in this bedroom, there were very specific things that I don't think a lot of people do in this world, and especially with kids. And so their stories sync perfectly. And so it seems like the odds of that being fraudulent go down quite a bit. But what is the Kubler-Ross stages, right? Anger, denial, negotiation, then acceptance. Well, there's going to be people stuck in those first two for the remainder of their lives, I guess. I don't like to have that kind of stuff rattling around inside my mind, I think that's all I've got. We'll do a super short bumper. There's a website, deepthoughtsradio.com. Everything's up there. That's all you need to know. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.